for America, American history here. The plane has landed, and we are just awaiting the doors to open and for those American former Russian prisoners to really touch down their feet back on American soil after several years and several months of being away in uncertain situation. A very emotional day for their families that they have been waiting and praying for so long. This is a live look at Joint Air Force Base, and we know there was a presidential motorcade there. Vice President Kamala Harris about to meet these families here as they emerge. We are seeing this is a presidential car here. Not sure if it's the president or the vice president about to emerge, but it's certainly a very, very exciting moment. A lot of hard work across the world in different countries. Here's the president and vice president walking towards that plane. We're going to be jumping around between different shots to show a full picture of what's going on here. But again, this is a live shot at this historic day. President welcoming freed Russian prisoners.
Remember, it is the largest prisoner swap since the Cold War. 24 prisoners were exchanged between multiple countries today. The deal freed Evan, a Wall Street Journal reporter, and former U.S. Marine Paul Whelan, among others. It involved several nations and included key exchanges from the president, who you see there walking to the plane to greet these freed Americans today. We see the Vice President Kamala Harris there as well to mark this historic occasion. Understand that these folks have been there in just horrible conditions, really. And so they are just so thankful that we did not forget about them, that we kept on this story, and that so many people have been fighting and praying for this moment, and it is now here. I do want you to also remember that Paul, the former Marine, he was convicted of espionage, and he was convicted in Russia back in 2020. Of course, he denied those allegations, and there you see him stepping off the plane, Paul Whelan, to thank the president, to shake his hand for this moment that he could return home and be with his family. I don't know that we have audio, but we can at least see the moment where he is greeting now the Vice President, Kamala Harris, thanking her as well. I think we could hear some cheers there in the background for this moment, because again, like I said, he was convicted in 2020. You know, when we saw the release of Griner a while back, some people, Brittany Griner, right? People were saying, well, what about Paul? What about the former U.S. Marine? And I know at the time the president had said, we're not going to forget about him. We're going to continue working to try and get all people who were being held prisoner there in Russia released. We do know that there are at least some who are still there in Russia, but this is a historic occasion because it is again being deemed the largest prisoner swap since the Cold War. And we have these Americans who can now come back home and greet their loved ones and greet the president. There you see Evan, the Wall Street Journal reporter, who has that big smile on his face, giving the vice president a big hug as we're taking a live look at history really in the making.
Oh, we're hearing the cheers from the crowd that has gathered to see this historic moment. And Christopher, this really is a moment that so many of us around the world, including their families, of course, never thought would ever happen. You know, this is really their wildest, biggest, heartfelt dreams come true. And it's an amazing thing to see them, you know, looking well and smiling, looking in good spirits, because as we had mentioned before, Russian prisons are very notorious, extreme conditions. We don't know what it's like inside, so we do eagerly await eventually in the near future for them to share their experiences and their stories. But at this point, they are being greeted by the president, vice president, Joint Air Force Base, Andrews. Really a historic moment. There is another former prisoner we are expecting as well. I wonder if Alsu is on this plane as well, but they're greeting their families, giving hugs.
Big hug there.
Oh, we know they waited more than a year for that, and journalists around the world fighting, keeping an eye on him, and just, wow, this moment has come. I think this is Alsu, pardon my pronunciation, Kurmasheva, I believe, giving the president a big hug there too. She's a journalist with Radio Free Europe and Radio Liberty.
I tell you what, and she had a young daughter who you saw earlier in our reporting, a 13-year-old who has been waiting to see mom. And there, the president there with her, shaking her hand, welcoming her back. You see, she seems very emotional after all that she has been through, shaking the vice president's hand, thanking her as well for this moment. Just think about her young daughter, that 13-year-old who hasn't had her mom, and what this is now going to mean to the family now that mom is back home after having been jailed there in Russia. The interesting thing is, there is the moment. There is the 13-year-old that we were telling you about, greeting mom after all this time.
So beautiful to see. We're getting choked up and teary-eyed seeing this because we've been following this journey for years now, right alongside with these families, and to see this happening live on TV, it's such a blessing. And these are moments that are, that we really all share together. I'm really speechless at this. It's really touching, a great moment to see, historic as well.
The interesting thing here, of course, that we have to note is that we don't know what these Americans have been through. We don't know what they've experienced, but they are back home, and that is what we can celebrate now. There will be so many more stories, so many more things to understand about what they have gone through, what they have experienced. But there you see the president and vice president welcoming them home after what has been quite the ordeal for these families. We promised to bring it to you live because we wanted you to be able to witness this historic moment throughout the evening. It's something that we have been following on air and online, and we're going to continue to do so right after this break.